One if by land, two if by sea. Can UCF commit to the run game?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, the Mike G, mixing Paul Revere quotes with football here on a Tuesday morning. My good friend Andrew Gluchov from UCFKnightZone.com. Guys, thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every single day. Turn us up, turn us on. It's Tuesday. We're talking about committing to the run. One if by land, Andrew. Fixing the offensive line, which is going to be, I think, something we're going to be talking about a lot the rest of the season, and then how to beat Kansas here after losing to Kansas State. Look, let's start at the top here. The run game, again, is proving to be very boom or bust. Big plays followed by not so effective plays. And then the numbers end up looking good, but in reality, it's not as consistent as maybe the box score is implying when you look at it. You know, how do you fix the run game, man? How do you get Scott Frost and these guys to commit to the run in a way that takes the pressure off the quarterback, but still allows the UCF to control the clock and control the time of possession and control the pace of the game?
Well, I mean, you look at the stats, you know, comparing the first half of last week's game against Kansas State versus the second half. First one, 11 rushes for 31 yards, a 2.8 yard per carry average. Not good, Bob. The second one, 22 for 174. That's 7.9. That includes that big run, 45-yard scamper by Myles Montgomery. And then you had the big 54-yarder in the second half by Nixon. I mean, you know, granted that those two runs are part of the whole, and you still have to. But if you look beyond that, I mean, it's just the numbers are just paltry, and this is UCF. You know, this is something they're going to deal with all year. We saw them struggle against Jacksonville State, a team they should not have struggled with. And you just kind of knew that once they went up against the corn-fed guys in the Big 12, they were in trouble. And you saw this. But what was more surprising, we talk about the how maligned the offensive line is, and we'll talk more about it, is it wasn't just limited to the run that they struggled against. Like, nothing worked. And so, you know, fixing the run, you have to be able to establish the pass. They couldn't establish the pass. And I think that was one of the big problems during the game is they could not establish a passing game. You know, you look at the numbers, 13 to 26 on the day between Tayven Jackson and Jacurri Brown. You know, obviously 50%, that's not good. We've always talked 60 is kind of your bottom end benchmark. And then you had the two picks, and you had I think it was 3 sacks given up and whatnot. And so if you can't establish a pass game, it's, you know, you're not going to be able to establish a run game, because here's the truth. Teams do not respect UCF's pass game, nor should they, because, you know, they haven't really done a whole lot. I mean, Tayven Jackson's not bad. He really isn't. His deep ball really isn't there, but his short to medium game is pretty solid if he has a chance to, you know, actually make a play. You know, obviously, last week he got knocked down, knocked out, came back in, wasn't quite the same. I mean, it's like at that point you have a bruised and beaten guy going back into the game trying to play, and it's just not the same. So in order to commit properly to the run, you have to see some degree of success, you know, outside of, you know, those one or two really big plays that just come together, you know, just the magic just works out. One of the things that you can find on the stat trackers is the big plays. UCF had 5 big rushing yard plays, and that is 10 or more yards. They had 5. 2 of them we just talked about. There was another 44-yarder by Montgomery at the late in the game, in the fourth quarter. UCF was making their last, kind of the last stand to try to get back into it. And then there was a couple of 11-yard plays. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot. Kansas State had 12 plays on the ground of 10 yards or more. So, you need something. And I know what Frost tried to do. He tried, when Jackson went down, he sent Brown in. Jacurri Brown ran the ball quite a bit. That's what he does. And it wasn't working. He 7 carries, 5 yards on the day. And that includes, of course, the one thing that I hate about, the rules of college football is if you sack, you lose yards. Granted, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
With Brown, because he actually was never sacked, but it affects in general. It's just one of the stat quirks that always gets me. But nothing worked. I mean, they ran ball on 4th and 1 with him, and deep in Kansas State territory, and they couldn't even do that. It's like how can you commit to the run if you can't, do these little things and make them respect you? UCF's strength of schedule was so soft. They were talking about in the TV broadcast how soft the strength of schedule was, and I think that worked against them, and they got slapped in the face pretty hard by Kansas State.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it worked against them. I think that maybe this result was kind of inevitable. I rather would have seen them get a little bit of confidence in these games, even if it was a little bit of fool's gold, then get a reality check and then reset and try to figure out if the truth is somewhere in the middle for this team here, right? Like North Carolina A&T, I will admit, I'm not sure that you gain much from a game like that. Even their coach was like, yeah, I'm not sure the $1 million.
Oh, that was brutal, man.
Yeah, right.
That was painful to see all those quarterbacks getting hurt. Oh, that was tough. Brutal.
And even though that's what they paid for, hey, here's $100, hit me harder.
I don't think that's what he had in mind.
yeah, yeah. Well, very enjoyable, Andrew. So I little innuendo there for our adult listeners. But look, I'm of the opinion that these types of games are inevitable. They did do some good things. They did have big plays. They've just got to find consistency. They've got to scheme it up. And they've got to take advantage. When Tayven Jackson went out of the game, the game felt like it was over to me.
I thought he was done, done.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, I was surprised he didn't come back.
He's done for the day, and then also he comes back, and it's like, what?
Yeah. They gave him the good stuff, I think. But when he came back, it was evident to me that this team kind of goes as Tayven Jackson goes. Your whole playbook just isn't open with Jacurri Brown. I know that he threw the 82-yard touchdown pass on a play that really
was a fluke, though.
Yeah, it
that was a missed tackle, and it was
it just wasn't like he threw a dot 50 yards down the field. It was a play that the receiver, made a good catch. Took advantage of a bad angle by the defender and had the speed to get downfield. But when I look at this, I think you've got to find some commitment to the run here. You've got to find a way to get Jay Nixon and Myles Montgomery going. They've proven that they can have big plays at times, but that's going to take us to our second segment. It's really hard to do without an offensive line. These guys can't block for themselves. And so we talk about how or if you fix this offensive line right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those that do more than just simply move. They deliver confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Plus Pick awards than anyone else as of August of 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every single model. Like UCF players, they sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Also, want to thank our friends at Monarch Money for sponsoring this segment. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture and you can end up leaving money on the table, which is always, always bad. Monarch Money is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I love being able to manage different accounts with my partner. That's like my favorite part. So her Amazon stuff doesn't hit my man cave account, but don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Sign up today. Fixing the offensive line. Can you fix the offensive line? Who is on the offensive line? Well, Carter Miller is on the offensive line. Guard Memelar, Preston Cushman, Keegan Smith, not Braden Marshall. Sorry. Didn't mean to put him up there. Keegan Smith, let me run back to him. Preston Cushman, Guard Memelar, Carter Miller, Paul Rubelt. Forgot about Paul there.
How do you forget about Paul? He's
right.
He's so tall.
The way they're playing, they might as well put Braden Marshall on the offensive line. Look, these guys are having a rough go of it. Now, again, I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for these guys with the loss of their position coach and Sean Clark. I mean, that is a loss that it just cannot be measured in words. You wrote a beautiful article on UCFnightzone.com honoring his memory, but also talking about how UCF could possibly use this as a rallying cry moving forward. That group has got to find themselves, and they've got to find themselves quickly. I think Scott Frost knows who he wants to be on offense as far as identity is concerned with Tayven Jackson at quarterback, but you need your offensive line to come along as well too. They got Cam Fancher killed in game 1 versus Jacksonville State. They cannot afford, I think we found out in just a short time he was out, they can't afford to lose Tayven Jackson at this point. Jacurri, man, he's dynamic as a runner. However, they're going to sell out against the run when he's in the game, and they're going to force him to beat them with his arm. I don't know what else to do about this, man. I just feel like it's kind of, we're getting to that point in the season where you kind of just are who you're going to be for the rest of the season along that offensive line.
Well, the truth is, it's the hardest position group to really tool. You talk about building in the portal, and so it's the hardest group because it's got the most people, and outside of the others, where you can kind of use one to help offset the other, you are as strong as your weakest person on the offensive line. Guy breaks through, creates a hurry, a TFL, or a sack. I mean, plays over. You can mask other weaknesses elsewhere in your position groups, but offensive line it's hard to find good guys that have that size. Otherwise you can find a big guy, but he doesn't have the strength or agility to be able to do what you want him to do. So I mean, it's hard. It's really hard. And, we've seen what the run game issues have been. Kansas State was a terrible run defense, and it took UCF over a half to start to figure it out. And eventually they started breaking some big runs in the second half, which is what they should have been doing the whole time against Kansas State's run defense. The problem was UCF's run blocking is the weakest part of this entire team. And it just, it doesn't work. What we really saw was the pass blocking getting exposed too. And this is where the strength of schedule does come back to haunt them. And this is where the scheduling, in my opinion, did fail. One, I like seeing a road game before conference play. I understand budgets are hard to balance and all that, and you want to do that. However, this was the first road game of the season. This was the first road test. They didn't have to go to any hostile environments or anything like that before they had to go into Manhattan. And Manhattan is not an easy place to play. So there's a problem right there. And, because they played such a soft schedule, the pass blocking looked great. I mean, Tayven Jackson was upright the whole time. The hit that Fancher took was a blown block by a running back. You had the guard pull, and the running back never stepped into to cover the hole. So the pass blocking was sound. It was strong. But you look at the box score numbers here, and you got 8 tackles for loss and 3 sacks by the defense of Kansas State, and that doesn't count the fact they had 6 quarterback hits too. I mean, they were knocking guys down left and right. The fact that Tayven Jackson came back in and just was getting pummeled, just absolutely pummeled. That it just you had to kind of feel for him. You kind of wanted to want to give him a hug. Now, during Scott Frost's press conference on Monday, he was asked why they went with Brown instead of Cam Fancher. Brown and Jackson had the majority of the snaps during the week. Fancher's still kind of beating off the rust, trying to come back from his injury. That's why they didn't put him out there. I think at some point they should have, just to get him some reps. You knew at a certain point that they weren't coming back to this game. They tried. They just could not put it together. I would have loved to have seen Fancher get a few snaps in there. But you might need him. Like, here's the real question, and I put this in my knee-jerk reactions. Brown looked shaken up at the end of the first half. We saw what happened to Jackson. We thought he broke his arm or separated a shoulder or something, and then comes back in, but he's not 100%. Are there any long-term effects by throwing him back out there to do this stuff? And he's taking hit after hit after hit on these plays. You might have to throw Cam Fancher back out there before it's all said and done, just by injuries. Now, knock on wood, UCF, was able to avoid the injury bug last year in the quarterback room. It was just the fact they were all ineffectively, inept that forced them to go into 4 quarterbacks. But now, you may end up with 4 quarterbacks through injury, which is what Utah had to deal with, and we saw how their season struggled. So something's got to give. And as you talked about committing to the run, well, committing to the run is one way to help keep your quarterback upright.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless you're Jacurri Brown, and then you are planning to get hit.
Well, this is a Kansas defense that's giving up 149 yards per game. That's about 10th right now in the Big 12. So people have been getting pushed against this offensive line here for Kansas State, and they've got a better sample size maybe than UCF right now, having played West Virginia and Cincinnati, since the latter of those a game that they pulled out by 3 points there. And then, from a passing standpoint, if you're UCF, it's just very simple. You've got to keep your quarterback clean. Now, they gave up a 35% pressure rate against Kansas State. That can't happen versus Kansas in your house. Now, if you don't know how bad 35% is, this is one of my favorite PFF stats that they take. I gave this example on yesterday morning show, but Alabama's Bryce Young was under a 37 to 38% pressure rate at Alabama. It was easily the 2 worst offensive lines Nick Saban fielded while he was the coach there. And he did amazing under the circumstances. But he was practically Superman. He put that offense on his back for 2 years. Andrew, that's not common. You cannot be
common
that
for
much
bad teams
pressure and play well, right? Look at what happened to Jackson Arnold versus Texas A&M and Oklahoma the last couple of weeks. Being under pressure over 30% of his dropbacks, you get pummeled.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very hard to get in a rhythm as a quarterback when your line is allowing that much pressure. Even if they're not actually sacking the quarterback, it throws the rhythm of your offense off. Routes can't develop downfield. If you're Scott Frost, you're going to have to get some sort of quick passing game going to get the ball out of Tayven Jackson's hands quickly and neutralize that rush. So at some point, you are starting to become who you are going to be for the rest of the season. Like, we're talking about fixing things. Before we started recording, you're like, I don't know if you fix this. I'm with you, my friend. I think that you have to maybe coach around it until you can improve it. But this feels like off-season work to me.
From a personnel standpoint, absolutely. But one of the things that they utilized in the home games was screens and short flare passes. That's we talked about how Tayven Jackson liked doing those kind of like jump passes to the running back. I mean, it was kind of weird how he would do it, but he did that a number of times and it was successful. Maybe that's the answer. You get the ball in the running back's hands, especially JaydEn Nixon, get him out on the edge where he has possibility to turn the jets on, get downfield, have those wide receivers block. Because those wide receivers are decent blockers. That's helped out with some of the running game and fixing some of the flaws of the offensive line. So they've got to find ways around the issue. And, not only just the offense side, you got to flip the score. Cause like you talked about Kansas's defense. Well, Kansas State's running defense was even worse. And it took UCF well over a half to kind of exploit that. And by then it was too late.
Yeah.
So UCF's going to have to do something with that offensive line. I don't know what it is. Give them like a few 5-hour energy drinks and just like make them so jittery that they just kind of go in like rabid rabies mode and just go absolutely nuts. Yeah, spike the, I don't know what you had to do, but just get them in like rabid rabies mode when they're just kind of like in the line. Do it for an intimidation and do it so that they jump off the and explode on the snap. Maybe keep the center with his wits about him so he can get the ball to the quarterback.
It's going to be really rough going if they can't get it fixed on offensive line. If you're Scott Frost, you've got to come up with a plan, and that plan has to work here well enough for you to win some games. You got to get 3 more. That's the goal. Get 3 more, get to a bowl game, get to the offseason, reset, continue to rebuild, and continue to instill hope for the future of this football program. You've heard me talk a lot about how powerful a thing hope is going to be, is both in its abundance and when it's gone. It can be very powerful. So look, speaking of hope, they've got a hope to beat Kansas this weekend. We're going to talk about how they hope to do that after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL season is here, guys, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Look, what I love about the FanDuel app is that putting together parlays is so much fun. It can be excruciating, but it is a lot of fun. You guys know my story about my $22,000 parlay that came up just short. Well, you know what? I actually got $300 in bonus bets that I used to make that bet. It was fun right up until Draymond Green didn't get 2 points, jerk. But if he had, I would have been having a lot of fun for a lot of time. So whether you're a casual fan or love diving into stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com and download the FanDuel app today to get started. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This episode of Locked On UCF is also brought to you by our friends at Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that make the neighborhood the neighborhood. There are places that become an extension of a home, whether it's the sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base, the spot with the best wings in town for the game, or that beloved local chain that's been rooted in your community for years. These businesses are what bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. Look, We've got a lot of local wing spots out here. I would absolutely die if they went out of business. We need companies like Square that make payment processing easy for small businesses. And look, Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, we'll see you in the neighborhood. How do you beat Kansas? What is the way to beat Kansas? I had some stats here that I want to talk about. We'll start on defense. As I mentioned in the last segment, they're allowing 149 yards per game on the ground. Through the air, they're allowing 226 yards per game. That is bottom 5 in the conference. In terms of total yards per game, again, bottom 5 in the conference. Right above Baylor. They're allowing 376 yards per game. But the stat that counts most is points. Like, you can move it up downfield between the 20s, but if you're not scoring points, Andrew, who cares, right? 20.6 points.
It's a John Maddenism. Whoever scores more points is going to win the game.
That's it. That's the name of the game. They are dead smack in the middle of the conference in points allowed per game. If you're UCF, you've allowed a paltry 15 points per game. Now, the first 2 opponents have to be considered in that number. However, if you're UCF, you need your defense to continue to step up. I think if you can hold Kansas under 24 in this game, you can get the win. You can definitely get the win. They've got to find those big home run plays, and they've got to, it's going to be a little boom or bust, I think, for UCF. Here coming down, now that we're in conference play, but connecting on the big ones is going to be the key for this offense, I think, moving forward. Establish a little bit more continuity in the run game, but continue to hit the big pass plays to your wide receivers. Marcus Burke, DJ Black, these guys have big playability. We've seen it. We've seen it both against the Cupcakes and the Power 4 teams so far. Kansas is a gettable defense, man. I think that they can win this one. What do you think, man? How do you beat Kansas in this one?
Something I've always talked about, and we've talked about before, especially last season. If you look at the box score, the defensive side for last week's game against Kansas State, 4 of your 5 top tacklers are defensive backs. And that is a recipe for disaster. So I've always said, you want, DBs to not be your leading tackler. In fact, 3 of the 4, there's Antoine Jackson had 8, and then you had 3 guys with 6, 2 of them being defensive backs. Not good. If you want to get off the field, prevent these sustained drives, you've got to get your linebackers and defensive line. They've got to make plays. And that's what they weren't doing. UCF has historically struggled against dual threat running quarterbacks. Avery Johnson was, a dual threat running quarterback, and he was very useful. Jalen Daniels is a running quarterback. He's second on the team in rushing, 40 carries, 214 yards, and a touchdown. We saw what that combination of a good running back and a good quarterback that can run can do to you. LaShawn Williams for Kansas is leading rusher, 245 yards. UCF against Kansas State, Dylan Edwards, who was their best running back, came back after missing pretty much the entire season up to this point, which is why Kansas State's really was better than the record. Shredded UCF, 20 carries, 166 yards. Johnson was 12 for 75, and even Blake Barnett, which when I first heard that name, I had like that name sounds awfully familiar. It's like, oh yeah, that was a USF guy that we once saw once upon a time. But even he was able to run the ball, 5 for 23. He wasn't really used in the second half, but he still, was able to run the ball. UCF's run defense was just absolutely gashed. Over 266 yards. Obviously more of that in the first half. So one of the things is set the tone. Set the don't let Kansas's run game run wild, which is what Kansas State did in the first half and built that big lead, and they were just able to nurse it the rest of the way. So you got to stop or at least contain the running game early. You cannot let Jalen Daniels run free. That's something that UCF has struggled with. Containing the outside this year. I've seen a number of outside runs where the defensive end over pursues a little bit. You're not running. Your edges are all ends, so they're all bigger. They may not have quite the same agility that a linebacker may have on protecting that outside containment. And as a result, they get to that corner, they turn it. What should be maybe a 3-yard gain at the most turns into a 13-yard gain. You get those big chunk plays. So you've got to contain, you've got to get off the field, and the offense has to do their job. They've got to give defense time to rest. They've got to be on the field, stay on the field. Don't make stupid mistakes. And this is something that Scott Frost keeps saying over and over again about the penalties. Well, they keep doing it. I mean, there was multiple offside calls yet again, which there's no reason for. I mean, holding is holding. I know a lot of fans are upset of the lack of holding calls against Kansas State. There were plenty. But if that's the thing you're falling back on for losing the game, it means you screwed up in enough other places that you have more things to worry about. But do your job, play smart, move on ball, not on call. Don't let someone using a hard count mess you up, and take advantage of the home field. UCF and at the bounce house is not an easy place for opponents. I mean, if you can get the fans into it, they are loud. It's designed for noise. It's a steel stadium. It all reverbs, so it can get really loud down in the field. Comparatively for the 44,000 plus fans that are there, and use that as a weapon. You need all the weapons you can get, but it comes down to just a few fundamental things. Contain the run, limit the mistakes, offense stay on the field. And I think they can win if they follow those three things.
I agree. Look, 6 penalties for 45 yards versus Kansas State last Saturday, Andrew. But the 3 turnovers really killed you. And they scored off of 2 of those turnovers, I remember correctly, in a game that you lost by 14 points. So the defense is doing all they can to kind of keep you in the game. If you're the offense, you've got to do your part. You've got to hold on to the ball, and you've got to keep their offense off the field. This is why I wanted to start this today's show about talking about committing to the run. If you can extend time of possession, sometimes the best defense is a good offense that has long sustained drives and keeps the other offense on the side. They can't score from the sideline, Andrew. So I just want to see fundamentally sound football, and I want to see them.
Don't we all?
Back. Yeah, I want to see them bounce back. This game, I talked about this yesterday too, is going to be a little bit of a referendum on Scott Frost's ability to be able to get his team back up and motivated after a tough loss. Now, it was, they went on the road to Manhattan. A lot of us had them losing this game before the season started, and ultimately that proved to be true. But there are some other things that we thought about this season before the season that will not prove to be true in UCF's favor. If you're Scott Frost, now this is where high-level coaching comes in. You have suffered your first loss of the season, and it's a conference game. You got your butts whooped on the road, and you come home, defend home field. Motivate your team, go get everybody, get to the tape, learn the lessons that the tape is teaching, and get back out there and do it right. That's what they have to do. Protect your quarterback, protect the football, and you protect home field. And hopefully UCF is 1-1 in conference play after Saturday. Andrew Gluchov, senior writer at the UCFnightzone.com. Please go check out his work there. Andrew, I want to thank you for joining me on today's show. Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. It's a big moment here at Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 joins the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A Locked On football preview only Locked On can do. Catch college football kickoff every Thursday throughout the season and only on Fire TV. Catch us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.